Eagles fans have had enough as we just received a major Eagles coaching update surrounding the ongoing offensive coordinator search being very underwhelming in the early stages. And if the Eagles are going to get this right, they're going to have to go with the best guy available, regardless of the circumstances. And we'll break all of this down here on another edition of Eagles Digest. What's going on, guys? Alex Brooks back here with another episode of Eagles Digest as we break down this crazy offensive coordinator search for the Eagles to get an offensive identity in 2026. It is going to be very important that we get someone in here that can have full autonomy over the offense and help Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense reach the heights that we know that they can get to as they've been to two Super Bowls in the last 4 years. But before we get into all of that, here is a word from our sponsor. Before we get into all the news today, this video is brought to you by Kalshi. When you download Kalshi using the link below and enter the code DIGESTNFL, you'll get $20 when you trade your first $100. Kalshi is the largest prediction market in the United States. On their platform, you can trade yes or no on real-life events, whether it's sports, elections, news, and pretty much everything that you can think of. And it is live in all 50 states, including Philadelphia. For sports fans, you can trade on game outcomes, playoff chances, or player performances, all in a regulated market where you can cash out at any time. For example, for the AFC Championship, it's between the Patriots and the Denver Broncos. They're not giving the Denver Broncos any chance with Jarrett Stidham starting in place of Bo Nix. But if you feel like they can pull a 2017 Nick Foles out of their hat, go in and get on all the action and go trade for Denver to win the AFC Championship. And it's not just game outcome, guys. There is anytime touchdown, first touchdown, 2+ touchdowns. You can get in on all the action, whether it's RJ Harvey, Stephon Diggs, or anybody that you can think of regarding the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. You can go and trade for one of these guys. And then it's not just that, it is wins over 6.5 points, over 40.5 points scored. Any sort of thing that you can think of is right there for the taking on Kalshi. It is genuinely a smarter way to use your sports or news knowledge, and you can close positions whenever you want to. So download Kalshi with the link in the description, and don't forget to use the code DIGESTNFL to get your $20 bonus. And thank you once again to Kalshi for sponsoring this video. And for everyone else, let's get back to this video. And as we break down this offensive coordinator search by Howie, Roseman, and Jeffrey Lurie, I just wanted to kind of talk about just what the Eagles are going to be expecting from this offensive coordinator search. I mean, they're going to want to get someone in here who can have full autonomy over this offense, as I mentioned in the intro. But you also want someone who can be able to develop this offense to just reach a more watchable offense. I mean, that there's not a there's a very low bar that the Eagles are looking at right now because of all the weapons that they do have. So bringing in someone who wouldn't be able to do that, I think, is just a waste of a year. I know they did it in 2025 and 2023 with Brian Johnson and Kevin Patullo individually, but when you're looking at this Eagles Super Bowl window that they've been to two Super Bowls in the last 4 years, but have had wild card exits. So when you're looking at this recent offensive coordinator decision that I'll really get to in just a little bit, this just doesn't make sense in regards to bringing this guy in. As Jordan Schultz on X reported that the Eagles will interview former Bucs offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard today for their vacant OC position. Grizzard spent 2024 as Tampa Bay's pass game coordinator when the Bucs ranked third in passing. The team had 4 one-score wins in their first 5 games, with Baker Mayfield looking like an MVP candidate this season before injuries took a toll on the year. And when we talk about Grizzard and his ability to just be like the offensive coordinator for this year, it was very underwhelming. I mean, you obviously know that the Buccaneers had a lot of injuries, but they also had Baker Mayfield as their quarterback. They mentioned in that graphic saying that Baker Mayfield was playing like an MVP candidate the first 5 weeks of the season, but this offense really collapsed. And that reminds me of 2023 with Jalen Hurts, as he was playing like an MVP candidate through the first 12 games, and then the offense collapsed. So he's a former passing coordinator turned OC and gets fired because of the collapse by the offense. Well, that's a tale that the Eagles have been, really showing in the years where they come off of their Super Bowl appearance. So it's the exact situation that the Eagles were in last year and in 2023. So this is not someone that I would want to bring into this Eagles team. And a little bit more on this. This was from Anthony Miller at Fansided talking a little bit more about this, saying there are way too many similarities between Grizzard and former Eagles offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo, as both were pass game coordinators before becoming offensive coordinators in 2025. Also, both were fired after ranking in the bottom 15 in points and yards. This is one where the Eagles are just trying to do their due diligence, but it doesn't make sense to bring in Grizzard after failing as the Buccaneers offensive coordinator. That offense included Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, and plenty of talent to be a top 10 offense. And I agree with Anthony talking about that because this would just be a full on mistake. It would be a mistake for the Eagles to bring in someone who is kind of having these same tendencies like Kevin Patullo last year. And I think that they're just, as it mentioned, doing their due diligence, but it's not someone that I feel like the Eagles are going to put in a lot of serious time with, even a second interview. Wouldn't even probably get to a second interview knowing how much of a concern you have with how the offense looked for the Buccaneers in 2025. But, looking at the OC interview so far, wanted to break this down here on this episode, talking about just all of these offensive coordinator candidates and just kind of going to bring my thoughts on who I like, who I dislike, and all of that. So when we talk about Josh Grizzard, I've obviously mentioned how that would be a frustrating hire. That'd be a little bit of a, scary thing to look at going into 2026, knowing that he didn't have much experience play calling. He only had 1 year under his belt play calling with Baker Mayfield. And obviously that year for the Buccaneers last year or this past year just did not look right. And then the other offense coordinator candidate, seems like every single time the Eagles are looking for an outside candidate, they're going to be interviewing Jim Bob Cooter. He was the former Colts offensive coordinator. Shane Steichen called the plays in Indianapolis, but Jim Bob Cooter, he was the Lions offensive coordinator in 2015 through 2018. So he has experience calling plays with the Detroit Lions and with Matthew Stafford. So that is a very interesting thing. And he does have connections with Nick Sirianni. So that's definitely something for, some Eagles fans would feel like, we don't want to hire anybody that has a connection with Nick Sirianni at this point. But, knowing that they had that connection, it's bound for the Eagles to have that sort of interview. So that's an interesting candidate. Wouldn't be too mad, but it would go on the side of being very underwhelming as a hire. The next guy up there, Mike Kafka, former Giants interim head coach, offensive coordinator. He'd be an interesting candidate for me because when I was watching Hard Knocks, if you guys haven't watched Hard Knocks with the NFC East, it kind of really dove into how Mike Kafka was with Jackson Dart and this Giants team after he took over for Brian Dable. I like how he was able to form a connection with his quarterback. He was someone who I think is a former quarterback who can really develop other type of young guys. And I think that's a underrated connection when you look at someone like Jalen Hurts, who needs someone who's played the position and knows how to really develop an offense. The Eagles had that in Kellen Moore, former quarterback in the NFL, and he was able to form a connection with Jalen Hurts. So this would be a very interesting hire. I definitely would like to see, a little bit more of, the play calling design and how he can do, because he only had a short sample size with last year being the offensive coordinator. So just a very interesting candidate, but definitely someone who I wouldn't mind if the Eagles did hire. And then Zach Robinson, I made a video on my thoughts with Zach Robinson, just going to kind of summarize that. I would like it. I would like Zach Robinson as the offensive coordinator because he is able to call plays and he's able to really develop an offense and really focus on the strengths of Bijan Robinson, the running game, and Kirk Cousins in the passing game. And he would, have the same success with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. The rumor interests: Brian Dable, Mike McDaniel, Bobby Slowick, and Charlie Weiss, the LSU offensive coordinator. Obviously, we know that we like, as an Eagles fan collective, Brian Dable or Mike McDaniel, because they both have shown success in the NFL, especially with Mike McDaniel, who has been able to, orchestrate a top offense with Tua and other weapons like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So that would be a perfect connection, as well as Brian Dable. Coming from the New York Giants, he has play calling experience and he was able to develop Josh Allen earlier in his career. So definitely major types of, interests and major types of benefits with most of these candidates outside of Josh Grizzard. I definitely think that the Eagles could go in any sort of direction, but I definitely think that with Zach Robinson, Mike Kafka, and most of those guys in the rumor interest, I would love to see those guys as the offensive coordinator in 2026. It's definitely going to be an interesting couple of days when the Eagles are going to go through second interviews and they are going to make sure that they can get this hire right for 2026 because they know that, it may not just be the guy who you want to have for 2 or 3 seasons to have continuity under Jalen Hurts, because you have to focus on winning a championship and winning multiple championships. And if you're able to get the best guy like Mike McDaniel, Brian Dable, or whoever you think, that is going to be the perfect recipe for success for this Eagles offense. Knowing that you have Vic Fangio on the other side, it's not an easy type of process, but if you get the right guy in here, it can be a smooth sailing ship to a Super Bowl and Super Bowl 61 in 2026. But that's going to do it for another edition of Eagles Digest. Wanted to raise the question to you guys: which offensive coordinator candidate brings you the most hope for this Eagles offensive turnaround in 2026? Comment your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think regarding these offensive coordinator candidates so far and who you like the best as the new play caller in 2026. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. We're having more coverage here on Eagles Digest, so stay tuned for that. And as always, go Birds.